Good morning, dear ones, and welcome to Unity Church. A very special welcome to those of you who are visiting with us today. This morning, we tune in from our singular rooms to join together in worship. Welcome to this time we set aside each week to help us find and keep our balance, to think about those things which matter most, to root out racism in ourselves and in the world, and to align our lives to integrity, service, and joy. We understand that being anti-racist is a daily, ongoing practice, not a statement, but a commitment. Here in the sanctuary, your worship leaders gather, taking appropriate precautions, learning as we lead, to offer clarity, comfort, and inspiration in these trying times. We know that nothing can replace the face-to-face, hand-in-hand, voices raised in song connections embodied worship can bring. We also know that ministry we share has never been about a building. This church is not closed. After this service, whether this is your first time or you've been here your whole life, you're invited to participate in a virtual Zoom coffee hour where we share a bit of our lives with each other and get to know one another more deeply. Stay for just a few minutes or stay for as long as 45 minutes to connect in smaller breakout rooms. Information about how to participate is available on Unity's homepage, and the link to coffee hour will be shared at the end of this service. If you'd like to learn more about Unity Church and Unitarian Universalism, we invite you to participate in today's Finding Yourself at Unity at 1 p.m. This week's 1-hour online offering is a Q&A session with Rob Eller-Isaacs and myself. Information about how to connect with the class is available on our homepage. All are welcome. Next Sunday, during a service entitled Passing Over and Coming Back, Reverend K.P. Hong will explore the essential spiritual journey of passing over from one culture to another, from one way of life to another, of entering into the experience of others by sympathetic understanding and coming back to see ourselves anew. In the coming days and weeks, we will continue to find new ways to come together for worship, for learning, for deep connection, for justice making, and for love. Welcome and stay tuned.
Good morning. In the famous scene from the 1999 hit movie The Matrix, the protagonist, Neo, knows that there is something wrong with his life, but he can't figure it out. When Neo finally meets the rebel leader Morpheus, Morpheus offers Neo a choice to help him out of the muck and confusion that he feels. Morpheus presents his clutched fists and then says, "This is your last chance. After this, there is no turning back. You take the blue pill, and the story ends. You wake up in your bed and you believe whatever you want to believe. You take the red pill, and you stay in Wonderland, and I show you how deep the rabbit hole goes." You see Neo hesitate, knowing that the outcome of any choice is never 100% clear or certain, and that many choices are kind of more in your 51%, 49% split. Then Neo makes his choice, picking the pill that he hopes will lead him out of the confusing muck of his life. Come, let us worship together. And please join me in the responsive reading number 531, the Oversoul. Let us learn the revelation of all nature and thought, that the highest dwells within us, that the sources of nature are in our own minds. As there is no screen or ceiling between our heads and the infinite heavens, so there is no bar or wall in the soul where we, the effect, cease, and God, the cause, begins. I am constrained every moment to acknowledge a higher origin for events than the will I call mine. There is a deep power in which we exist and whose beatitude is accessible to us. Every moment when the individual feels invaded by it is memorable. It comes to the lowly and simple. It comes to whosoever will put off what is foreign and proud. It comes as insight. It comes as serenity and grandeur. The soul's health consists in the fullness of its reception. Forever and ever the influx, this better and more universal self, is new and unsearchable. Within us is the soul of the whole, the wise silence, the universal beauty to which every part and particle is equally related, the Eternal One. When it breaks through our intellect, it is genius. When it breathes through our will, it is virtue. When it flows through our affections, it is love. I now invite you into a few moments of silence.
And after that silence, we invite you to join us in prayer. Praying for these ones in our community. We hold Julie and Tomkin Coleman in their grief. Julie's stepfather, Richard Councilman, died at the age of 83 on July 20th at his daughter's home, where he had been under the care of hospice. He died surrounded by the love and care of his family, including Julie's mother, Sharon. Richard and Sharon had been together for nearly 40 years. No services are planned at this time. We join Susan and Tim Hinsey as they grieve the loss of their dear friend, Catherine Grimes, and hold her beloved husband, Bob, daughter Delia, her sisters, family, and friends in our prayers. Catherine, a woman of reflection, integrity, fierceness, humor, and love, died on Tuesday from a swift-moving and treatment-resistant cancer. We hold Matt and Kelly Nelson, Maren Nelson, and Darren Kovar as they surround Matt and Maren's mother, Nancy, with tender love and care as she enters hospice and approaches her final days. Nancy and her husband, Russ, celebrate their 51st anniversary today as the entire family witnesses to the truth that joy and sorrow are woven fine in the fabric of every life. We send our healing thoughts and prayers to Ellen Green, who will be undergoing knee replacement surgery tomorrow and will be returning home to recover on Tuesday. And we continue to hold Barbara Hubbard as she recovers from COVID. Her healing is aided by all the love and support she has received from her family and her community. Oh, infinite love that we can never fully understand. There's so much that is broken now in our hearts, on our streets, in this delicate creation we call earth, we call home. We see shards everywhere. As we rest in your care, breathing, if only for a moment, one blessed moment, move, we pray, so we feel the mending in our own spirit, and so we feel our own capability, our own strengths rise, and so we rise to become your hands and feet in mending this home. Amen.
Spirit Good morning, especially to the families, the children who are joining in this morning's service. Back in March, among the must-have items from retail stores, historians will likely note toilet paper, baking yeast, all kinds of meat except shrimp and ribs, and games. All kinds of games, video games, board games. This is a story about the game of chess. A teacher, a student, and the principles of chess. I want to invite the children to come a little closer to your screens at home and join me. In the game of chess, teachers often talk about 3 phases of this game: the opening game, the middle game, and then, of course, the end game. In 1993 in Calicut, India, at the World Junior Chess Championships, there was a fascinating end game between a very talented Indian, Suresh Kumar, and the young American chess prodigy, Josh Waitzkin. They were equally matched. They had the same number and type of piece. 1 bishop, 5 pawns, and of course, they each had their king. What decided this fascinating game, however, was that while Suresh largely played the other pieces to protect his king, Josh showed the chess world what is possible with a king. He used his king not to stay protected, but he used his king to move and strategically attack his opponent's king. If there's one thing that Josh knew about the game of chess, it was that practicing the end game mattered tremendously. Those of you who are familiar with that movie about Josh Waitzkin, Searching for Bobby Fischer, you know that at the age of 6, Josh started playing chess in New York City's Washington Square Park. Soon, he was discovered by a chess teacher, Bruce Pandolfini. And Bruce worked with Josh and helped Josh become an international chess phenomenon. But Bruce had a very unusual way of teaching chess. You see, many chess teachers would set up the board and they would begin by teaching the young students the opening moves, the opening game. You set up all of the pieces, and maybe the white will lead with pawn like this, and then I will respond like this, and then early on the queen comes out. I might respond with the knight, and then the bishop comes out, and then I might respond with another pawn, and then queen takes my pawn, and then checkmate. You win. These opening moves, there are hundreds of them, and teachers love to teach, and students love to learn and memorize these hundreds of opening moves so that you can beat your opponent rather quickly. You don't have to struggle in the game with your opponent, and you don't have to deal with any of the pressures of a long and drawn-out game. You just have to memorize these opening moves, like the answers from a teacher's guidebook. Just memorize it and play it, and it can quickly make you a decent chess player. Bruce Pandolfini went in the reverse direction. Instead of teaching Josh the opening moves, he actually taught Josh the end game. So they removed all of the pieces from the board, they cleared it all up, and maybe at the end there was just a king, a pawn, versus another king. The end game, with every other piece removed, that taught Josh everything that he could possibly learn about what a king could do, what a simple pawn could do. And because the board was emptied, to see all of the creative ways that a king that can only move one square at a time, what a king could do with all of this space on the board. Not only that, but removed of the busyness of all of the crowded pieces on the board, Bruce taught Josh about the principles of chess, about blocking, about controlling the center. Just like Unitarian Universalist values that you and I know, like the inherent dignity and worth of every person, or the free and responsible search for truth and meaning, or the interdependent web of existence of which you and I are a part. Chess principles, like the inherent strength and possibility of every single piece, including a pawn, or you're free, just the memorized moves from my handbook would tell you to do, but these principles and values that help you to determine what the next move should be. These principles that help you to see the positions where the openings might be. These principles that help you to judge whether the game was already hopelessly lost or whether there was actually a way through the difficulty. Bruce taught Josh to always practice the end game because it revealed the principles and values to find our way, especially if we're stuck. These principles that Josh learned were not just for the end game, but he learned that any moment in the game could be an end game, and that these principles and values would serve him well. And so in 1993, Josh, with a bishop and a few pawns, but with the king, showed the chess world what he knew about the principles of chess and how the game was not over and how he would go on to win using a king that could only move one square at a time. And so may it be for us as we live into our values and our principles. Amen.
When I turned 40, I decided to take a wilderness trip canoe trip to Alaska just to prove to myself that I could do something like that. A friend who professionally led countless wilderness adventures offered to guide a trip to paddle the Noatak River in July, and I jumped at the chance. Located in the northern part of Alaska, just south of the Brooks Mountain Range, the Noatak has its headwaters in Gates of the Arctic National Wildlife Refuge, a true wilderness. And I was really excited that I was going to be seeing caribou herds, muskox, grizzly bears, the midnight sun, and wide, wild, untamed expanses. When we arrived at our jumping-off place in Bettles, Alaska, the 8 of us loaded our gear and 2 weeks' worth of food into 2 single-engine propeller planes and took off. The view from the plane was absolutely stunning. Splendid mountains, and then the short trees stunted by the cold weather that characterized the landscape north of the Arctic Circle. And with no structural landmarks such as telephone poles or roads or tall buildings, it was difficult to gauge distance. When we landed almost an hour later, the valley was many miles wide. We found our rhythm within a couple of days as we adapted to the sun never setting and being surrounded by wilderness. At one point in our journey, we had to pull over to the bank of the river and let a massive herd of caribou, probably 500 animals or more, cross the river in front of us. And we were even more amazed to watch as a grizzly bear took down one of the caribou and drug it off on the opposite shore. And even though it was July, the daytime high temperatures were generally in the 50s. So my daily attire consisted of a base layer of long underwear, wind pants, and then up top, long underwear and varying levels of fleece, and my rain jacket on top of that. In addition, we wore wool socks and knee-high rubber boots. Now, boots are essential gear to keep your feet dry and protect you as we get in and out of the canoes in the 35-degree icy glacial melt river water. One day, as we were pulling off the river for the night, I was in the bow of the lead canoe, and as I prepared to hop out, as I had done many times before, I stowed my paddle and grabbed the bow line so I could pull our canoe to shore. And just as I had my left leg over the side and was hopping out, I heard the trip leader yell, "Watch out for the suck mud." Oh, golly, too late. My leg was already over the side of the canoe, and immediately me and my left boot sunk down into the muck. It felt like I had just jumped into a 24-inch deep pool of wet, cold concrete. With my right leg still in the canoe, I took a moment to quickly assess my options. Okay, plan A, I could flop back into the canoe, but I would risk losing my left boot, remain stuck in the muck, and possibly lose it there for the rest of the trip, so I quickly rejected that option. Okay, plan B, complete my totally ungraceful exit from the canoe. Then I could pull up on my left leg and boot and make it to shore, hopefully without getting muck inside the left boot. So, plan B it is. But no sooner did I finish getting out of the canoe than me and both boots sunk farther into the muck, almost to the very tippy top of the boots. Remember, I said these were knee-high boots. And I've sunk close to the very top. So now I'm really in it. Now what do? In the meantime, my compatriots had observed my predicament and floated just a short way downstream and avoided the whole situation. But they shouted encouragements, suggestions, and muffled some giggles. All right, totally stuck in the muck. Try plan C. Gradually pull up on the left boot, move a little bit, and then do the same with the right, and gradually I would make it to shore. Okay, go. But pulling up on my left only made my right sink deeper And now the frigid, watery muck flowed into the right boot. I finally realized as the cold muck water poured in that no amount of alternative planning was going to get me out unscathed. I just had to accept that I was going to get totally mucked up, but try to move forward anyway, because really, there was no other choice, which I guess ultimately that became my plan D. Just try to pull each leg up a little bit and scoot forward. And about 10 minutes later, I made it the 20 feet to solid ground. My thighs sore from the effort and completely decorated in Arctic suck mud. As Brian and I were planning for this service, talking about how we get stuck and what helps us get unstuck, I realized that this story is an example of how I approach the very common occurrence that happens in my life and in every life, and that is getting stuck and not being sure how to go forward. What are the next right steps? When I get stuck, I try to remember to pause. Well, sometimes I do and sometimes I don't. And then formulate some plans. Some of them work and some of them don't. But when it comes right down to it, there is no way to get through my stuckness without being willing to slog through the suck mud. And in the end, there's no way out but through. And my prayer for each of us is that we have friends around to shout out encouragement, suggestions, and laugh along with us as we slog our way through. May it be so, and amen.
Though the church's ministry is now largely online, the church's financial obligations, of course, continue. Your support of the church is an expression of the promises we make to each other and to the world. We know that some of you have had your hours reduced, and some of you are furloughed or have lost your jobs entirely. Please do let the church know if you're facing financial difficulty. The church is here to help. But don't let fear undermine your commitment to the ministry we all share. Please do your best to be generous with the church so that the church in turn can maintain the staff and the programs and keep our promises to the many communities and the many partners that we work to support with our Sunday offerings. Today, the larger part of the offering will support Minnesota's Creating Opportunities for Post-Secondary Education Program, or COPE. The mission of COPE is to assist underrepresented scholars in identifying educational opportunities, key resources, and the financial support necessary to realize their academic, personal, and professional career goals. This offering helps provide opportunities for talented youth to engage with special projects, programs, and enrichment activities. During the offering interlude, please visit Unity's homepage and follow the link to the Sunday service in the Sunday service section to make your donation. You can also use the Give function located in our Shall Be Next membership app and the online database, or go old school and just mail a check to the church. Thank you for being as generous as you can.
Our first reading is from Parker Palmer. The soul is like a wild animal, tough, resilient, savvy, self-sufficient, and yet exceedingly shy. If we want to see a wild animal, the last thing we should do is go crashing through the woods, shouting for the creature to come out. But if we are willing to walk quietly into the woods and sit silently for an hour or two at the base of a tree, the creature we are waiting for may well emerge, and out of the corner of an eye we will catch a glimpse of the precious wildness we seek. The second reading is from David Whyte and are two different pieces from his book, Consolations. Beginning well involves clearing away the irrelevant and the complicated to find the beautiful, often hidden parts of ourselves that are essential and necessary to live something that feels like a choice again. It is always hard to believe that the courageous step is so close to us, that it is closer than we ever could imagine, that in fact we already know what it is, and that step is the simpler, more radical than we had thought.
I didn't know it when the phone rang that this would be the beginning of my career. I was a sophomore in college. It was Sunday noon, and I picked up the phone, and it was the program director of our student-run college radio station. And he said that the fellow student who normally does the Sunday afternoon classical music broadcast was severely hungover and couldn't make it into the station, and rumor had it that I might be able to say some of these names on the radio, these composer names. And could I please come down and be here within the hour? So my career began because of a hangover, which ultimately led to Minnesota Public Radio, downtown St. Paul, and 34 years there. I was on the air a little bit and enjoyed being on the radio, but for the last 10 years, I increasingly left the microphone behind and found more meaning, more enjoyment, more creativity, actually in leadership, running one entire department of Minnesota Public Radio, the classical division, trying every day with a wonderful team to create moments, to create touch points, to surprise people with beauty, with classical music. And throughout the course of that career, throughout living and swimming in this music, it became on a par for me like religion, a secular religion, but still the deep meaning of religion. And at its best, some of these pieces became like prayer. The COVID virus hammered Minnesota Public Radio's finances, as it is doing worldwide, shutting entire economies down, for-profits, nonprofits, educational institutions, churches. Everyone is struggling. In April, our CEO said that the company was going to do something unprecedented and offer incentives for people to leave, that there was no sugarcoating this, the budget was going to be have that much challenge to it. After a lot of deep soul-searching, talking with my wife, Angela, it made sense for me to take their incentive and to leave, voluntarily end my career. I had thought there'd be another at least 2 or 3 years of working, and instead it became about 2 weeks. And I closed my office door on May 29th. And the first sound I heard as I stepped outside the building, literally with my cardboard box, or boxes, was the sound of National Guard helicopters overhead. We all know what happened earlier that week. So the disorientation of these past 2 months has been as sharp as vertigo. Who in the world am I now? The identity I got from that position. Looking around, what in the world is happening to my city? And with the tragic ineptitude and calculated cruelty of our president, I've been asking, what in the world is happening to our country? So I feel like I'm a living experiment, embracing the suck mud that Rebecca stepped into. What to do? What to do? If nothing else, I've been lacing up my shoes every day, walking 1 hour, 2 hours, 3 hours around the Como Park area where we live. I have tried meditation. I have pretty much a love-hate relationship with meditation. Most of the time I find it extremely annoying, but I keep trying. And I found one that actually is starting to help. And you can try it with me. It's very, very simple. I have to make this as simple as I can. It's just breathing in, and as I breathe in, I say the word in my head, be. And as I exhale, I say the word here. Let's try it. Be. Here. Be. Here. This simple exercise actually helps me feel where I am now. And that's helped me return to something that I have found over the years to be a sacred text for me. Ralph Waldo Emerson preached to the Harvard Divinity School graduates in 1838 this long, probably 2-hour-long sermon. And sifting through that again, I find phrases that leap out 175 years later as if he has written them for me. One in particular has been so meaningful in these past 2 months. One sentence. In your soul, there are resources for the world. In your soul, there are resources for the world. So as I try to be here with my soul, walking, sometimes in meditation, what have I found? I have found mostly grief, frankly, for people I love and left at NPR, for music that means something dearer to me than almost I can explain, for my loss of an identity, and the hardest loss of all is an erasure of purpose, of simple usefulness. Now, this grief, it's not comparable to the loss of a spouse or a child or a beloved family member. I'm very clear of that. But it is still my grief. And sometimes as I've been walking, I made the mistake early on of actually listening to the radio on an exquisite morning in early June. And it doubled me over with the sense of loss there on the sidewalk. So I haven't turned the radio on since in the last 2 months. It's been that sharp. Here's another poem by the poet David Whyte. Sometimes if you move carefully through the forest, breathing like the ones in the old stories who could cross a shimmering bed of leaves without a sound, you come to a place whose only task is to trouble you with tiny but frightening requests. Conceived out of nowhere, but in this place beginning to lead everywhere. Requests to stop what you're doing right now and to stop what you are becoming while you do it. Questions that can make or unmake a life. Questions that have patiently waited for you. Questions that have no right to go away. Question many of us at Unity are asking right now: what is the next right action? The events of May 25th have added urgency and a new challenge to this. So the questions I've sat with for these past 2 months and walked with is, how can I make my own small difference in any way for the way ahead? Started reading for the first time in humility to understand much more fully the experience of neighbors that I have yet to meet. Ibram Kendi's How to Be an Anti-Racist, and a book I really have enjoyed a great deal is called Begin Again by Eddie Glaude. He looks at American slavery, hundreds of years of it, the Civil War, Reconstruction, the civil rights efforts of the 1960s, all through the lens of James Baldwin's writings. It's a fascinating construct. And he does so as a way to understand how in the world we got to where we are today, having elected the racist who sits in the Oval Office. Glaude could not achieve America. Baldwin loved jazz. One of his favorites, I think it was his favorite, was saxophonist John Coltrane's 1965 recording of a suite of 4 big improvisatory pieces that he put together and called A Love Supreme, a piece that frankly baffles me, has for years. But I've spent time listening to it in these last weeks, and that is the point. It's for me to try to understand with the readings I've been doing the experience of another, the language and the music of another. What's been so outside my world of this beautiful Schubert you heard just a few minutes earlier, and outside this world of Western classical music. So I can try to imagine and to bring into my own life my own small next right action, and to recognize my own agency so I can make new choices and commit to next steps, my own next steps in the work ahead, especially before November 3rd. So I've been listening as closely and as deeply as I can to Coltrane and how he sang with his saxophone. And at one point in the recording, he puts this sax down and he starts to chant over and over again, a total of 19 times, this phrase on a 4-note theme. A love supreme, a love supreme, a love supreme. A few years ago, I was out mowing the lawn, and we have a corner lot, and the length of the lot is, of course, a boulevard. And I looked down and realized that I had been mowing Creeping Charlie for years, for decades. And now, how is this a good idea? Isn't there a better way? So a landscaper and I installed a butterfly garden, the entire length of that stretch. This summer, as I've been home, looking out at it, sometimes walking through it, I noticed in the hottest part of the afternoon, there's one monarch butterfly that comes to feed and to rest. Of course, it might be 16 monarch butterflies, but they seem to be taking one at a time turns at the flowers. So I think of it as one, and I've named him. He's Herbie. So I look for Herbie most afternoons, and I get inordinate pleasure when he shows up. And it occurs to me that at some way I feel so in the middle of this stuck mud that maybe this is all I can do at this moment is just feed one beautiful butterfly before he makes that amazing 1,500-mile trip to Mexico. Of course, the more I sit with it and watch him, I realize the symbol. Perhaps I am him, and I am also resting. I'm also feeding, getting ready for what's ahead. Where will this journey take me? Can I lift one boot from this muck? Sometimes, if you move carefully through the forest, breathing like the ones in the old stories who could cross a shimmering bed of leaves without a sound, you come to a place whose only task is to trouble you with tiny but frightening requests, conceived out of nowhere, but in this place beginning to lead everywhere. Requests to stop what you're doing right now and to stop what you are becoming while you're doing it. Questions that can make or unmake a life. Questions that have waited patiently for you. Questions that have no right to go away. What tiny, frightening questions are in your soul right now? Remember, Emerson said, in your soul there are resources for the world. So what does your soul long for right now? May all of us find ways in a still moment of every day to listen closely, listen deeply for those answers. That is your and my journey guide for the next step. Amen.
Do you hear, oh my friend, in the place where you stand, through the sky, through the land? Do you hear, in the heights on the plain, in the vale on the main, in the sun, in the rain? Do you hear, through the roar, through the rush, through the throng, through the crush? Do you hear in the hush of your soul, hear the cry you won't still, hear the heart's call to will, hear a sigh starting trill in your soul, from the place where you stand to the outermost strand? Do you hear, oh my friend? Do you hear, all the dreams, all the dares, all the sighs, all the prayers? They are yours, mine and theirs. Do you hear,
In the days ahead, may you take that moment and find and sit in the clearing of your own forest. This will take time. This will take patience. But that's where your resources are. And the world has been waiting for you to come and claim them, to make them your own, to make them yours and help mend this home.